Thank you very much. You can see the outline of the talk here, and you've heard already that it's on our joint behalf, so Anna Wierzbicka and myself. We'll spend some minutes just trying to talk you into the problem in a general sense and review a bit of history. Then look at some rephrased and revised explications, because, you know, basically there are problems with parts. And this part of the presentation will be very specific, and then we'll reach a wind up. How come it's not advancing for me? Just give me a second, people. Overall, the issue with parts is, many people have raised some sort of questions about parts, but few people are really interested in disputing that at a conceptual level there's a gap, or there are cultures where there's no sort of whole part sort of concepts. But the claim is about the lexical status of the have parts relationship. And the reason that is that there are certainly languages which don't have any word, like the English word part. And what I want to do in this talk, or what we want to do, is give you a briefing about the current work on this problem or this issue. Actually, I wouldn't call it even a single issue, because it's not really a single problem, and it doesn't have a single solution. Nonetheless, our strategy is to go forward by first focusing on the body and its parts. There are reasons for this to do with phenomenology and the sort of universality of the human experience. What we want to do is to locate the most reliable lexicogrammatical frame, which has got to do with having parts. And you'll see that there are some findings or some proposals, and then to set about revising explications to essentially prune out the old part, that's to say untranslatable uses of part, as we now see. And the question is, can that be done? And our answer is, at this point, largely yes. However, there are some problematical uses of what I'll call old part, which need to be reworked, not using any sort of part notions at all, but instead using place or some, or one of various different substitute ways of dealing with inclusion, one could say. And I also want to point out that we now think the best way of citing the prime is something like this: have parts, with a kind of secondary allex of something like be part of. Just a little bit of history. It's a common misconception, perhaps not among this group of people, but it is a common misconception that NSM linguists think that every prime should have a distinct and unique exponent, which is simply not right. Going way back to, just give me a second, but going way back to 1994, in the Semantic and Lexicon Universals volume, Anna and I already acknowledged there are languages which don't have a distinct word, like the English word part. And we argued at that time that the same meaning could be expressed using words for something or thing or what in a specific lexicogrammatical frame. That lexicogrammatical frame involved talking about bodies, people's bodies having many parts. So it was actually have parts, which was identified as the sort of the lexicogrammatical frame where you are likely to get a more or less unambiguous expression of the concept. And this is a bit of a sort of mea culpa only in the duel here. You will find in these early works declarations that have parts and having parts is more basic, and really that should be the way of talking about it. But unfortunately, the fact was that in tables of semantic primes, the prime was still identified, like in the citation form, so to speak, as part, even in a singular, which has been very problematical. In a recent work in the Russian Journal of Linguistics, Anna has tried to sort of rethink and refocus on this one specific lexicogrammatical context, where she argues that the parts concept ought to be clearly expressible in all languages, namely sentences like this: people's bodies have many parts. One of them is the liver. So in a context like this, people's bodies have many parts, supported by some kind of example, at least in this lexicogrammatical context, Anna believes, and I agree with her, that we would expect this sort of thought or this proposition to be expressible clearly in different languages. Well, we know that in various languages, it comes out like this: people's bodies have many things. Now, in our view, what this means is that in this context, the expression has many things, I hope you can see the air quotes here, is expressing the same meaning as has many parts. Now, I just want to log here another thought. It could be that this best starting point, as I called it, namely looking at the body and its parts, might be a great starting point from the purpose of conceptual analysis. But hold this thought, it's not necessarily a great place to start in terms of culturally natural discourse, and I'll come to that later. But first, I want to acknowledge a further complication. There are certainly languages where the normal way of rendering these sentences, like people's bodies have many parts, doesn't involve any separate word corresponding to parts, including no word corresponding to things. And a much discussed example of this is from the Walbury language. Actually, it's a translation of a sentence from the Bible. A person's body has a head, 2 arms, 2 legs, and as the translation is supposed to render, and many other parts. But in Walbury, if you just look at this last bit here, it's not saying and many other parts. This is the and word. This expression here just means many others. No word for parts and no words for things. What to make of this? Well, one way to look at it is that, well, it's still expressing the same meaning. So if someone says in Walbury, in this context, and many others, then it's expressing the same meaning as one would say in English, and many other parts. And so that's our first important point, that essentially the same idea can be expressed in the 2 languages, and you can take something said in one language and transpose it into the other language. And we've ventured to call this a portmanteau strategy, in the sense that the words other in this context, or many, is kind of standing for many parts. And this portmanteau strategy, if you look at it that way, I mean, I'm not sure it's the optimal terminology, but other languages are also known to have this as their favorite way of expressing things. So these Algonquian languages, which have been studied among other people by Maria Del Juncker, they have verb-like words that can mean something like be 2 and be many. They're sort of predicate-like words. And if you use them about a group of people, or it would mean that there are 2 of them, or there are many of them. But if you use them about a singular subject, particularly, well, for instance, about a person's body, and you say something like about it is many, the human body, it is many, it conveys the same meaning as we would put in English, it has many parts. Or if you would say about a knife or something like that, it is 2, that's a good sentence, and it seems to convey the same meaning as we would say in English, it has 2 parts. So at this level, it seems that the part relationship is expressible, but not in the way expected through an independent word, but rather the word like 2 or many is standing for, from an English speaker's point of view, 2 parts or many parts. So this is very discussable, and I'm sure we will be discussing it. I want to point out here, just make the observation that this whole context is starting from the whole. you start from a whole thing and you say it has two parts or it has many parts. And this was a big point that Maria Dill made in her study way back in 2008. And we're still in touch with her. She can't be here today, but she's still interested in pursuing this problem. And I want to note that, so as not to sort of put the wrong words in Maria Dill's mouth, her overall conclusion back in 2008 was that East Cree did not have a lexical exponent for parts. Okay, further complications. In English, the word part is polysemous, not just in English, but in other European languages. And we now admit that some of these Euro uses of the word part, or English uses of the word part, have led NSM linguists to overuse part in explication. So in English, you can use English word part sometimes as an exponent of a semantic prime sum, like if you would say part of the meat was burnt. That's the use of part, which we have to stop using. We have to stop using the word part as such. And likewise, you can talk about someone being part of a family, and that sounds just weird in many languages, including some European languages. So here probably part is standing for a different way of getting the inclusion relationship, basically one of these people. Okay, all of that was the beginning. Now let's look at some explications quickly. This is what we would now, this is how we could now propose the explication for head, a nice part of someone's body. So what's a head? Well, we could start off by saying something like, people's bodies have many parts. This is one of them. So you start with the whole, you establish the idea that this could come out in a language as people's bodies are many. This is one of them. People can think about it like this one. It is like something round. It is above all other parts of the body. It has some parts not like any other parts of the body. People's bodies, because people's bodies have a part like this, people can know many things, they can see many things, they can hear many things, they can say many things. Now, our idea is that despite the fact that we have used the word parts in our explication, that these, in English-based NSM, that these explications will still be transferable component by component into other languages in a sort of matching fashion. Let's look at eyes briefly. Eyes, what are eyes? People's bodies have many parts. These are two of them. One is like the other. The point here is that there are dual body parts, and you know, not only eyes, but ears, legs, and so on. And we have to have a semantic template, an explication structure that'll work for the so-called singular body parts and also for the dual body parts. This structure here, you saw it before with head, now you're seeing it with eyes. It starts off with these kind of top level components. Then there's a block of how people can think about what you're talking about, sort of shared human construals. In the case of eyes, they're on the same side of the head, one is near the other, they're small, they're like something round. And then we think that this template also has what we could call in academic English affordances. Because people's bodies have these two parts, or these two, people often see things in many places. A similar proposal will work for, a similar structure rather, would work for ears. Unfortunately, I can't go into this slide, but I wanted to show you that in some other explications that use part concepts, they can be rephrased in a different way. Instead of talking about parts of a knife or something like that touching something else, we can say that it touches something else in some places, and it's some of the knife. Instead of talking about some parts of it, we can say some of it. So the essential point is that I think under the influence of constructive critiques from inside the NSM community and from sort of neighbours, critical neighbours, we are taking this on board and we're making progress. But I wouldn't say it's a case of problem solved. Absolutely not. We are making progress, but we are not done. My final observation here that in this talk is that going back to the idea that it might be conceptually a good place to start if you want to talk about the necessity for something like the whole part relationship. The human body is a very good place to start. But one of the difficulties is that from a cultural naturalness point of view, you may find in many cultures that people really are not interested in talking about the meaning of body part words. And you may find also in many cultures that people are not interested in stating the obvious. I mean, in other words, taking words which are so simple and basic that they are in fact semantic molecules and everybody knows what they mean, and spending a long time discoursing about how to spell out their meanings. And I think this is definitely part of the difficulty in communicating successfully with language consultants. They often want to give you a sort of simple, and it seems to me sometimes an impatient kind of reaction, just sort of stating a key component. I'm sorry I haven't been able to sort of realise the talk in its full glory. There are some select references here, and we'll be sharing the slides with you people later. I'd like, though, at this point to stop and get into the question time.